In a story filled to the brim with Saiyans, comes Piccolo, a Namekian warrior of extraordinary strength, resolve, and because he's Akira Toriyama's favorite character, he's the one with the greatest and, quite frankly, almost inexplicable power boosts in the entire series. However, it is my job to try my best to explain them, and in the process find out how strong Piccolo actually is. I'm totally not Mark, and this is the Power Level series. Episode 4, Piccolo. Hey, hold it, Green Man. I thought my episode was today. Like, what gives?
Yeah, what the fuck, dude?
Well, you see, after crunching the numbers, there really wasn't a point of reference for you guys. But don't worry, I found a way to find your respective power levels. Or as best I could estimate. But in order to get to those figures, I need to find Piccolo's power level first. And as soon as I do that, I'll get back to you guys straight away. And I'll do it in this video too.
Whatever.
Yeah, what she said. Piccolo is a Namekian warrior, aged 28 years old when you take into account the roughly 40 days he spent dead and the 1 year he spent in the time chamber. His techniques include the Great Namek, the Special Beam Cannon, otherwise known as the Makanko Sapo, Light Grenade, and Regeneration. Fun fact, Piccolo was 8 years old when he took 5-year-old Gohan after the Raditz fight. Gonna give you a second to wrap your head around that one. There are 7 officially stated power levels for Piccolo, those being 322, 408, 1330, 1480, 329, 3500, and over 1 million. Alrighty, using this official reference as our basis, let's see if we can squeeze some more blood from this stone. It's time for some good old-fashioned mental gymnastics. At the beginning of Dragon Ball Z, Raditz reads Piccolo's full power as 408, but by the time he touches down 1 year later against Nappa and Vegeta, his power has skyrocketed to 3,500. That's an increase of 8.5 times. Which is enormous when you take into account that he trained on his own primarily, while also mentoring Gohan. None of the past fighters in this power level series have been able to hold a candle to this kind of solo improvement. So this is an important factor I think to consider when looking at his training in the future. Before we move ahead from the Saiyan saga, I'd like to draw your attention to one other tidbit. During the Raditz encounter, while wearing weighted clothing, Piccolo's power level was 322. However, Bulma's remodeled scouter reads Piccolo's power at 329 after the Raditz fight. That is an increase of 2% after a near-death battle. From this new piece of information, I think it's fair to assume also during the Nappa fight with Krillin and Gohan, Piccolo's base power increased. The fight was longer and he played a more major role. Let's say an increase of 3.5%. We'll call these micro boosts for the sake of simplicity in the future. I think it's important for me to point out at this time that this is distinctly different from a Saiyan Zenkai boost. This boost seems to be the result of intense exertion. So with that 3.5% buff, that increases Piccolo's power level from 3,500 to 3,622 when he dies on the battlefield in defense of Gohan. Having died, Piccolo along with the other fallen fighters from the Saiyan invasion quickly make it to King Kai's planet. There, Piccolo announces that he has every intention to surpass Goku and that he will help him defeat Frieza. Confidently and highly motivated, he states this. Alrighty, so this next bit can be a bit confusing and nuanced, so listen carefully. It's one of the most important time periods for Piccolo in the entire series. He gets a huge power increase, and on top of that he receives some important exposition regarding his future. Piccolo on King Kai's planet confidently states that once his training is complete, both himself and Goku would have no trouble taking out Frieza. He however states this never having sensed Frieza's energy. Now, when Piccolo is wished back to life and transported to planet Namek, he encounters Nail. This is the important part. Nail has an official max power level reading of 42,000 during this time period. This is extremely important because when Piccolo finds Nail dying on the wastelands of Namek, Nail expresses his astonishment at Piccolo's power, who at this point is still wearing his weighted clothing. When Goku trained on King Kai's planet, he was capable of a 19.5 times increase within 158 days, during which he learned the Kaioken and the Spirit Bomb. Piccolo was dead for 51 days. There is no exact time frame for how long it took the Z Warriors to clear Snake Way, other than that it was done much faster than Goku did. So let's say for the sake of keeping the ball rolling, it took them roughly 2 weeks. That leaves Piccolo with 37 days in which to create this vast increase large enough to warrant Nail's astonishment. Some interesting tidbits from the interaction between the two Namekians are the comments Nail makes regarding the benefits of merging with Kami, saying that if he had done so, he might be able to defeat Frieza. Nail, however, states this having no knowledge of Frieza's true abilities or transformations. Anyway, For Nail to be astonished, Piccolo's power would need to be way over 42,000, but not strong enough to defeat Frieza. Nail can sense Ki, and therefore knows, or should have an idea, of the other huge powers on the planet. Nail was the appointed protector of Guru and therefore would have been on the lookout for these kind of things. So he would of course have been aware of Goku's sudden rise to 180,000 during his demonstration of the Kaioken versus Captain Ginyu, so using that information I can estimate that he believed Frieza to be between 200,000 and his first form max of 530,000. He is certain that Piccolo would die if he chose to fight Frieza without taking him up on his offer to fuse with him, so he is much stronger than Nail and is much weaker than what Frieza demonstrated to Nail. So again, for the sake of progress, let's guess that he is somewhere in the region of 80,000 to 110,000, meaning he multiplied his power between 22 and 30 times over. So let's assume that Piccolo is 110,000 by the time he lands on the battlefield with Nail, because Toriyama. Whether or not you agree with my method to get to this figure, this is the only figure that satisfies the conditions of the narrative as a whole. The merging with Nail resulted in Piccolo gaining a power level over 1 million. We all know this as he managed to get the better of second form Frieza, which is confirmed to have a power level of over 1 million also. So for simplicity's sake, it's fair to assume, given how the fight went, if Frieza was around 1.1 million, Piccolo would be around 1.2 million at this point. If this is true, this means his fusion with Nail yielded at 11 times Multiplier. I suppose it's to be expected from Namek's #1 son. Now keeping these micro boosts in mind also, seeing as the battle with Frieza was greater, it would be worth more. But I am also keeping in mind that he didn't participate as much as he had in prior fights. So I'll give him a boost of 4%, bringing him to 1,248,000. These micro boosts didn't apply to the entries prior in the Power Levels series, as I had no evidence to prove they attained any boost and had no means to garner an estimate percentage based on their respective efforts. Okay, so this next bit might be controversial, but ignoring the obvious character bias that Toriyama has for Piccolo, this is the only theory I could map out that accounts for the frankly preposterous power-up Piccolo gets between the events of Namek and the Android Saga. So let's break this down. Regarding Namekian fusion, Nail worked well and yielded a high multiplier because Nail was a fighting prodigy like Piccolo, they were similar builds and sizes, and they were both warrior-type Namekians. But I don't believe this is where Nail's contribution to Piccolo ended. Certainly not if my mental gymnastics have anything to say about it. My theory is that Nail had his power previously unlocked by Guru, which would make sense. He was, after all, the protector of the Grand Elder. Thus, by proxy, could have unleashed Piccolo's potential when they merged. Similar to Krillin going from the mid-1000s to 75,000 in a short span of time, which is in and of itself a 42 times increase, Piccolo could have had his power creep up slowly through training after these events. After all, we all know that fighting ability, strength, and knowledge can be passed through merging, so why not this? Because if not this, we all need to accept that Piccolo magically garnered a metric crap ton of power in the span of 4 years through regular training. Now let me be clear, Piccolo is objectively astronomically stronger fighting the androids than he was on Namek. And so given the information that I have found, this seems to be, for me, the only plausible explanation for such an enormous power boost. Following this train of thought, however, we don't know is there anything that causes this power up to accelerate or if it requires anything and simply moves up on its own. Piccolo saw much less action than Krillin, who was also brought back to full health after battle, therefore spending much more time healthy. Krillin's 42 times increase isn't a concrete converter either. Gohan had more and Dende had less. So again, for the sake of keeping the ball rolling, let's give him a 17 times multiplier, which is kind of in the middle of what I was talking about, veering a little on the low side. This at least gives us some context for how he manages to stay relevant in this series and competitive amongst the Super Saiyans, besides the fact that he's Toriyama's favorite. Taking these figures into account, we can work out that Piccolo's power by the time he begins training for the androids is 21,216,000. Moving swiftly along, this back and forth could be indicative of Piccolo being more powerful than Vegeta at this point, even though Vegeta clearly passed well over 1.2 million while fighting Frieza on Namek. After this, Piccolo trains for an additional 3 years in preparation for the androids' invasion. I came up with this buff based on the results of past training sessions over the course of a year or more. In prep for the Saiyan invasion, he trained for 1 year and gave himself an 8.5 times boost in power. But between the Piccolo Jr. arc and the Raditz arc, over 5 years passed and he only garnered somewhere in the region of 33 to 40% of a buff. So I decided to give him a regular 8.5 times power boost over the course of those 3 years, bringing his total power level on the day the androids were activated to 180,336,000. After all, I am working under the pretense that his power had been unlocked, so naturally there would be a slow in the amount his power would rise through natural training means. During this time period, Piccolo scuffles with Android 20. At this stage, Piccolo, while not being as strong as Vegeta, is regularly in the same conversation as him. Trunks was roughly 150 million to 180 million while fighting Frieza, since Frieza was more powerful upon return. So, in order for Piccolo to be in the Super Saiyan conversation, it makes sense for his power to be, as I stated, around 180 million. With this power, he is capable of easily disposing of Dr. Gero, who foolishly used logic to anticipate their growth rates. The next major moment of significance for Piccolo comes when he remerges with Kame. At different points in the series, both Piccolo and Kame are referred to as two halves. With the information we gather from the manga, we learn that Piccolo becomes the host body for the merging as he is younger and stronger than Kame. With this knowledge, we can discern that he doubles in strength if they are in fact two halves, adding both the knowledge and experience of Kame to the host body Piccolo. This brings Piccolo's overall power level to that of 360,672,000. Which reminds me, I think now is a good time to check back in with our android friends. Piccolo, take 5. Gotcha. Android 17 and Android 18, aka Lapis and Lazuli, are human-type Earthlings with biomechanical enhancements, with an approximate physical age of about 17 years old. Both can fly without the use of ki and have techniques which include Now We're Playing for Keeps, Power Blitz, and the Android Barrier. In the Dragon Ball canon and in the encyclopedic Daisenshu books, we are told time and again that 17 and 18 were humans, taken against their will and forcefully transformed by Dr. Gero. Within this panel you can see that Bulma views Dr. Gero's blueprints of the twins, which informs of their largely non-mechanical nature, the only mechanical parts being emergency stop and self-destruct to be exact. A cyborg is a human being that integrates or enhances itself with external feedback systems, be they mechanical, chemical, or otherwise. There is a lot of details still to discuss left in this topic, but I'll leave it there. They are cyborgs, not androids. Androids is a mistranslation. If you would like to read more in depth about this topic, I will leave a link in the description down below. That said, I'm a lazy creature of habit and will not actively try to call them cyborgs from now on. But just so we're clear, the androids are cyborgs. Now, onto more android stuff. Regarding their power, two things are important to consider when talking about the androids. They have infinite energy, and their ki cannot be sensed. These 2 points I think are important to remember when looking at the androids' battle potential. The whole reason why so many fights in Dragon Ball come to an end is due to fatigue. Either the hero or the antagonist succumb to exhaustion and as a result get their comeuppance. This quote further hones in on my estimate for the android's power level, stronger than Super Saiyan Vegeta around this time period. Using all the information we know about the androids, we can infer that at this point, Android 17 is as strong as merged Kame Piccolo at 360 million. I'm estimating he is slightly lower based on the fact that Android 17 struggled for a small portion of the fight before Piccolo began to fatigue. It's important to note that the term fatigue means to tire, and as a result power levels will sharply decline. The same is true for anyone on the planet in the real world. It doesn't matter how much you can lift, if you're tired, you're as weak as any of us. That's one of the biggest things working in the androids' favor. They do not tire. When trying to infer both of the androids' power levels, I think it's important to look at this quote. This statement is indicative of both Android 17 and 18 having similar power levels, close if not identical. But that's not enough. This is the Power Level series. I'm not just gonna give up. So let's take a closer look. During my initial research trying to find out which of the two twins was in fact the strongest, I stumbled upon this image. It looked as though it answered my question perfectly, but I couldn't find the source of the image or the supposed interview it was quoting. The image I later learned was a doctored fake from one of the final pages of volume 15 of the manga. The original image regarding Android 17 states, too much attention was placed on the power capabilities, so it refused to take orders. Failure. And regarding 18, it states, although its power was suppressed compared to 17, it also did not follow orders. Failure. This is undisputable confirmation that Android 17 is the stronger of the two androids. It's difficult to discern by what margin 17 is stronger than 18. After looking at past quotes, it cannot be by much, but not enough information is available to draw any accurate comparison. So again, for the sake of forward momentum in this video, 17 must be around Piccolo's power level of 360 million. He states that during his fight, Piccolo was on par with him. But as Piccolo's stamina wavered, the gap began to widen due to Android 17's limitless energy. So keeping in mind that this is a conservative estimate based on Android 18's battle with Vegeta, I would put Android 18 somewhere in the region of 330 million. It could however be closer or further from Android 17's level. This is just an estimate based on what I have to work with. It's important to note also that their power levels have not diminished at all since the Cell Saga. They do not fatigue and run on endless energy. Therefore, their bodies do not break down. Regardless of whether or not training has been done or if they've sat on their ass for 10 years, their power level cannot diminish. Now, back to the green guy. So at this point, Piccolo is the strongest Z-Warrior by far, surpassing even the Super Saiyans. Fun fact, this is the second time in this series where Piccolo is the strongest Z-Fighter. The first being back when he was fighting second form Frieza on Namek after newly merging with Nail. Once Piccolo's fight with Android 17 comes to a close, I will not award him any micro boost. At this point, Piccolo's power is fully unlocked and fully realized, and any increase after this is slowed greatly. Once Cell absorbs the two androids, Piccolo proceeds to the time chamber where he trains for 1 year on his own. Once Piccolo exits the chamber, Goku and Piccolo have this back and forth. It's worth noting that Goku makes this statement after attaining Super Saiyan Grade 4 or full-powered Super Saiyan. Being in this state, he is still much stronger than Piccolo and still no match for full-power Perfect Cell. So, what kind of increase does Piccolo gain while in the chamber? In calculating this, I am trying to stay in line with the story of the show and trying to be fair knowing what we know about Piccolo's character. Piccolo at this moment is fully realized. He is fully merged or complete, and using my excuse for his enormous boost in power, has had his power unlocked also. Currently, he's running on the most optimum settings, so to speak. In the past, there have been 2 instances that demonstrate the results of Piccolo's training while solo, that being the span of time from his defeat at the hands of Goku to the arrival of Raditz, which over 5 years he rose his level from somewhere in the 300s to 408, so at most he gained a 36% buff overall. During his training with Gohan, however, we know that he gained substantially more. Given that the span of time he had to work in the chamber was for 1 year, taking everything into account, that he is already fully realized and merged, that his time frame for improvement is short, and that he was training on his own, I will award him a 50% buff. Which might not seem like much, but remember, he only managed a 36% increase over 5 years before, so really this might even be too high. But let's highball this. So with that increase, it results in a power level that I've estimated to be around 541,008,000 when he leaves the time chamber in preparation for Perfect Cell. The only other significant battle he participates in the Cell Saga comes against the Cell Juniors. Again, I will not award any micro boost for reasons previously stated. At this point, Piccolo doesn't have a goal and the world is in an era of peace. That's not to say that he doesn't keep training. In past times of peace, Piccolo trained intensely. However, a gap has been created that he might view as insurmountable. Motivation has always been what drives our characters to become stronger. So that for me is one of the biggest things to consider when gauging how strong characters would become over extended periods of time. Taking all of this into account, I will give Piccolo a 25% buff over the Buu time skip of 7 years. Note that the growth of his power is slowing down while Gohan himself has gotten weaker since the Cell Saga, bringing him to an estimated power level of 683,022,600 at the end of the Buu Saga. During the time skip, I would imagine Piccolo has become more comfortable and trains less. Not because he has lost interest in training, but mostly due to the fact that he cares for Gohan and his family. Our first time seeing Piccolo in Super comes in the very first episode, when he stands atop a building keeping an eye on Gohan and Videl as they go about their business during the day. During the events of the Resurrection of F arc, he participates in a lengthy fight with the Frieza Force, as well as fighting the Frieza elites like Shisami and Togoma. After that, he has a very brief showing in the Universe 6 tournament, followed by no observed activity since. With the likelihood of him taking care of Pan more and more, weighing up all the pros and cons, I believe Piccolo to be somewhere in the region of 717,173,730 by the time he joins Universe 7's squad. So let's recap. No info has been made available for the training of 18 or 17, so I will leave them as they were during the Cell Saga. However, if new information arises, obviously then their levels change. So, from weakest to strongest, we see Android 18 with a power level of roughly 330 million, we see Android 17 with a power of roughly 360 million, and Piccolo with a final power level of what I would believe to be in the region of 717,173,730. Anyone that knows Piccolo's character, and really after this video you probably know him better than any character in the show does, he is an amazing strategist with a unique moveset. Being Toriyama's favorite character, who knows? Something amazing might happen with him. He has unarguably one of the best character arcs in the entire series, and I honestly can't wait to see what dynamic both him and the androids will bring to the squad. I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to leave a like if you did enjoy it, and if you guys would like to see more from me in the future, please hit the subscribe button down below. This has been the Power Level series. I've been Totally Not Mark. Thank you so much for watching.